Push. Sound should be working now. All right, I think the sound is working now. Make sure, leave something in the chat there to make sure it's working. But yeah, I think it's working now. I forgot to hit the go button there on the sound button. Working now? Anybody? No? I don't know. Okay, good. All right, so let's start all that over. We have a fun race this weekend at Kansas. Obviously, there are a lot of things going on here. We got the playoffs, so we got 2 drivers already locked in, Martin Truex Jr. and Brad Keselowski. That means we're trying to fill 8 spots, so we got 6 more to fill out of 10 drivers. So it's going to be interesting to see how the playoffs impact things. I think there are going to be certain drivers that are pretty far out that might need to take some risks, and then some other drivers that kind of don't really want to take risks, and then there's even another set of drivers that are right on the bubble there that are going to be watching each other. So a lot of different storylines going on in the playoffs this weekend for NASCAR, but let's see. So then the other thing is the model this weekend is very good. The R squared of the model is 0.64, so almost 65% of the variance in finishing position is explained by the model. What goes into the model this weekend? Starting position, so track position is important at Kansas. The 10-lap average, and the single lap, but much more so the 10-lap average. Then there's the year-to-date average finish of a driver, then the year-to-date laps led, so a bit of dominance, a bit of finishing. And then finally, the least significant variable, but it is a variable, is the track driver rating, so how well they've done at Kansas in the past. That does come into play a little bit. But by and large, we want to be looking at how they've performed this year and their 10-lap averages. And so that's kind of where the model stands this weekend. So a lot of good plays, but first of all, I don't see a lot of hashtag RVLive questions. So if you want to ask any questions, make sure you use the hashtag RVLive. That way, we actually get some questions in here that I have a chance to answer, and we can have a nice, fun weekend of answering questions. So with that said, I will jump right into the questions. The very first question, hashtag RVLive, what is the cheapest driver you're willing to play in cash, or the cheapest price point? So I'm not going to be playing in cash. I don't think I'm going to be playing anybody that is, I guess, what we would consider a Joe Dirt cheap, under $6,000. I think this is a weekend where I want to get a lot of balance and then try to get in some expensive drivers who have a chance to dominate. So a couple different ways you could attack cash this weekend. I know Martin Truex Jr. is an obvious play. I think the other options are either playing Kevin Harvick or Kyle Busch as like your second dominator there. I know some people will like playing Kyle Larson in cash. So there's a lot of ways you can go with those expensive drivers, which makes it very interesting. Obviously, Ryan Blaney's a lock in cash. And then there's a whole bunch of other options, but I think, where I'm going to be looking at is maybe somebody like, it's tough to say because A.J. Allmendinger didn't make a 10-lap run in final practice, so it's tough to rely on him in cash. But Ty Dillon, 29th there, I think you can make a case for him in cash games, certainly at $6,800, starting 29th. And then Trevor Baynes starting 28th. I wrote him up in my article. $7,200, I think, makes a lot of sense in cash games as well. You could use one or both, depending on how you go with the rest of your cash game lineup there. Next question, hashtag RVLive. Thoughts on Daniel Suarez? So I think Suarez is interesting just from the fact that he probably would be really low owned, but I don't love the play anyway. I just think there's too many guys that have a chance to do a lot better. Excuse me. And Eric Jones starting right behind Suarez is one of those guys. I think Eric Jones has a shot to have a very good weekend. Clint Boyer, I wrote him up in my article. I think both of those guys have just as much potential to finish inside the top 5 as Daniel Suarez, but they start a little bit further back. So I prefer them to Suarez. I know Suarez is cheaper, which certainly helps. So there's an argument there that you could save some salary from either Jones or Boyer by going to Suarez. But I think Boyer definitely has some fastest lap potential as well, and I'm not so sure Daniel Suarez does as much. So tough to use him, but if he finishes in the top 5, there's definitely a chance he could be in the winning lineup. So I think, if you're multi-entering, he's a guy you can have some exposure to. I just wouldn't go crazy on him by any means. Next question, hashtag RV Live. Are Harvick and Truex negatively correlated? No, I don't think they're negatively correlated. We've seen it a lot this year where if, Truex is on the front row, he and one other driver dominate, and it tends to be the other driver that starts on the front row with him. So I'm pretty sure we'll get more than one Dominator this weekend, and if it's going to be more than one Dominator, I think Harvick is the second most likely given his super awesome times in the 10-lap average, given in both the second and third practice session. So I think it'll probably be him over somebody like Kyle Busch. Could also see Kyle Larson squeaking in there. I know he's had a good car at points this weekend. But I definitely think it's Harvick. I think he has the car to beat, maybe other than Truex. And he might even have the car to beat over Truex. So those Stewart-Haas cars look really good this weekend. I like doing some Stewart-Haas stacks, stacking Harvick, maybe Boyer, or Harvick and Kurt Busch, and things like that. So the Stewart-Haas cars look great over the 10-lap run. Next question, hashtag RV Live. Thoughts on Chase Elliott? It's going to be tough for me to use a lot of Chase Elliott, given the fact that Kyle Larson right there starts 13th and Chase Elliott starts 14th, and Kyle Larson is only priced $700 more. I think he's got more upside. He's got a faster car this weekend. The Chevys don't seem to be as fast as, I should say the Hendrick side of the Chevys don't seem to be as fast as Kyle Larson, and not as fast as the Toyotas or the Stewart-Haas Ford, part of the Ford stable as well. So, Elliott didn't have the best practice times or by any means, so I think it's going to be tough to use him a lot this weekend. But, never say never, I guess. But I really don't think I'll be on Chase Elliott much this weekend. Just didn't post super fast speeds. I mean, his 10-lap average was 178.243. That's nearly 2 full miles an hour slower than Kevin Harvick, who was 180.120. So, when you're 2 miles an hour slower, that is not exactly chump change right there. Right, a low 180s lap is a 29, mid 29.9 lap, something like that, mid to upper 29.9. A low 178 lap is like a 30.3. So you're talking 0.4 of a second, practically 0.4 of a second, 3 to 0.4 of a second slower per lap for 10 laps. That's going to put you 3 to 4 seconds down after 10 laps. So I don't like Chase Elliott that much this weekend. I probably won't have any of him. Next question, hashtag RV Live. Baby Aiden, all right, would like a shout out, wants to know about Junior this week. Decent 1.5 mile data this year and decent Kansas history. So yeah, Dale Jr. definitely has both of those things going for him. And the other thing he has going for him is he'll probably be pretty low owned because his 10-lap average came in right behind Chase Elliott, but Chase Elliott made his 10-lap average at the very beginning of practice when it's a lot easier to make a 10-lap time, whereas Dale Jr. made his lap 31 to 40, which is a lot harder because the track is rubbered in more. It becomes a little slicker. It's hotter out. So the fact that Dale Jr. basically posted the same 10-lap as Chase Elliott, I actually think it almost bodes better for Dale Earnhardt Jr. So, that's a good thing he has going for him there. And then, you kind of just look at, like, where he's starting. I think, given the fact that Dale Jr. is starting in 19th, there is place differential potential there, top 10 potential. So, I definitely don't mind Dale Jr. this weekend at all, but I think he's only a GPP play. But I like him much more than Chase Elliott. You're getting him a lot cheaper. You're getting basically the same speed car and maybe even a little bit faster for Dale Jr. More place differential potential for a cheaper price. Next question, hashtag RV Live. Do you like Landon Castle in a GPP? I think he's okay. I don't love dropping down this weekend just in general. But Landon didn't post super fast speeds as well. He did have the 32nd best 10-lap average. Sorry, that's single lap speed. If we look at 10-lap average, Landon Castle was the second worst among those who made a 10-lap. So, I mean, I guess he's okay, but I just don't love it. You're kind of just hoping here with Landon Castle that, people wreck out and he's not one of them. So, not really too high on Landon, and not really too high on most of the Joe Dirt cheap drivers. I don't think it's a situation where we need to drop down to Joe Dirt cheap a lot this weekend, because it's not like, yeah, we do have Ryan Blaney starting 40th, but we don't have like Kyle Larson starting 40th. We don't have like Kyle Larson, Kyle Busch, almost like guaranteed dominators, at least two of those starting up there. Instead, it's Harvick, who comes at a bit of a discount this weekend, who I think is a very good dominator potential. So there is some room to maneuver with salaries, especially because, like I mentioned, a guy like Clint Boyer is a pretty good play, so you could drop down. You could go a little more balanced approach like that. So I don't love Landon Castle this weekend. I don't love most of the Joe Dirts, but there will be a few Joe Dirt cheap drivers. Next, so right now we need some more RV Live questions because I've already run out of them. So it's gonna be a pretty short show if we don't get much more questions here. But hashtag RV Live, who are your top 3 dominators? Obviously Truex. My next one is Kevin Harvick. I think if you go with a third one after that, it gets pretty tough. I kind of want to say Kyle Busch just because of his 10-lap average. And then, given the fact that he's starting 7th as well. But he hasn't set the world on fire lately. I know he definitely needs a good finish here. So I don't think he's going to be overly aggressive either because, I think if he crashes, he's done. But right now, he still has very much a chance to race his way in. I know he's on the outside looking in right now, but he very much has a chance to race his way in and doesn't need to take major risks. He just needs to grab, some stage points and then grab a good finishing position here, and he should be able to get in just with some strong finishes in the stages and then at the end of the race. So, I think Kyle Busch doesn't need to be overly aggressive and sit out front and lead laps. So I think that's why I give the nod to somebody more like Kevin Harvick. So who's my third most likely dominator? It's really tough to say. I guess third most likely, it might be. It's so tough, man. It's so tough. The model likes Kyle Busch, of course. But I personally don't. I think you could make an argument for Matt Kenseth. You can make an argument for Kyle Larson. You can make an argument for, even somebody outside shot like Clint Boyer or Blaney, even if he gets off strategy starting way back there in 40th. I mean, he did lead laps earlier this year at Kansas, like 20% of the race. So it's wide open for that third most likely dominator spot, in my opinion. I think the most likely is Kyle Busch, but I think it's pretty wide open. Hashtag RV Live. I've been playing NFL and haven't had time to watch qualifying. What are your good tips for doing research? Really pay attention to the model, and then try to find some good contrarian plays, just based off, do a little bit of Twitter research and things like that. So, figure out which drivers are happy with their car if you have a chance to peruse Twitter. And then, like I said, mostly rely on the model and then go contrarian in a couple spots. I think that would be a nice way. So a couple contrarian plays I wrote up in my article. There's probably 3 of them right there that are not even expensive. So definitely a lot of ways to go this weekend. Hashtag RV Live. Who's the Menard pick of the week? That's a great question. I'd like 3 drivers this week, and I think my favorite Menard pick of the week is Chris Buescher. He starts 20th. He didn't have the best 10-lap average, but he has very good single-lap speeds. His teammate A.J. Allmendinger had very good single-lap speeds. And I think people will be all over Ty Dillon, all over Trevor Bayne, and all over his teammate A.J. Allmendinger. He's going to go pretty under-owned, Chris Buescher there. So I kind of like him to, as long as he survives, maybe pick up a top 16. There's very much a chance he could pick up a top 12 if there's a lot of attrition like there was in the first Kansas race. So, Chris Buescher, very interesting play this weekend, I think, for a Menard pick of the week. 2 others, like I mentioned, Eric Jones and Clint Boyer are 2 other guys I really like in GPPs this weekend. And also Kurt Busch. I think Kurt Busch is a great play. If you look at his 10-lap average, it came later in the session as well, and he was the 2nd fastest driver that went later in the session. Finally, I should also mention Jimmy Johnson. He went later in the session as well and was the fastest of the 10-lap averages that went later in the session. So don't sleep on Jimmy Johnson either. I think he probably will end up going pretty low owned. And I think that's going to be an interesting way to kind of take advantage of Jimmy Johnson. Starting 12th, people probably look at Larson in 13th and $100 cheaper. They might look at like we talked about Elliott in 14th or things like that, Kyle Busch. So I think Jimmy Johnson will go pretty under-owned as well. I like him as a GPP play, but I think my Menard play of the week is Chris Buescher. Next question, hashtag #ReLive. What are the most comparable tracks to Kansas? Is Charlotte the most comparable track? No, it's not Charlotte. The most comparable tracks are Las Vegas Motor Speedway and a bit of Chicagoland. It's a little bit flatter than Kansas, but mostly Las Vegas. You could also build in, I guess, a little bit of Charlotte, but not much. But really, it's mostly Las Vegas Motor Speedway. It's similar in shape, similar in banking. Also has the variable banking like Kansas does. So Las Vegas Motor Speedway is going to be the closest comp to Kansas Speedway here this weekend. Next, 75% neighborhood on Blaney, I think is great. 80%. If you want to go 100%, no problem, because it's a lot safer than going 100% on somebody like Truex. If Truex wrecks, you're done for the day. If Blaney wrecks, you still have plenty of other drivers that can get you points, and Blaney still probably pick up a handful of points here or there by finishing 36 if he wrecks or something like that. So a lot safer to get 8 points with Blaney if he wrecks than negative 40 with Truex if he wrecks, for example. So if I will definitely be over on Blaney. I think it makes a lot of sense. Hashtag #ReLive. Danica as a contrarian play. She was running well in the spring race until she got caught up in the Logano-Almirola mess. This is a good track for her. So I do like, Danica as a contrarian play. I love how the Stewart-Haas cars have been running this weekend. I think she'll also, like Chris Buescher, will go pretty low owned. The big difference here is she hasn't shown as much speed this weekend as a guy like Chris Buescher, right? So if you look at Buescher's single lap, it was 11th. You look at Danica's single lap, it was 28th. You look at the 10-lap average, Buescher was 20th, but again, he went later in the session. Danica's 21st, and she went early in the session. So I think Buescher has a much stronger car than Danica this weekend. I'm not a huge... You're not going to be huge on Danica this weekend, but I think some exposure makes sense. And maybe even if you want to get a little bit overweight because this is a good track for her, I certainly don't mind that as well. She's had some pretty strong finishes actually at Kansas in the past. Actually, I'm going to look up what her finishes have been because I do remember distinctly one or two very good finishes at Kansas. Let me scroll down here. 1 second. So Kansas, let's see. She has 7th place finish. That's what it was. A 7th place finish at Kansas in 2014. You mentioned earlier this year she was running well before that incident. She's had another top 20 last year, an 18th place last year. So Kansas, and a 16th place finish in 2014 as well. So a 7th and a 16th. That's a very good year for her there at Kansas. Definitely one of her better tracks. I don't think she's out of play, but... compare her to somebody like Chris Buescher, I think just, the fact that they're starting 20th and 22nd, it's not that far apart in starting position, and Buescher has a much better car. And I think she and Buescher will both be pretty low owned when you look at the fact that like Ty Dillon, Trevor Bayne are all starting further back, AJ Allmendinger, and probably have just as similar a reputation, I should say. Next question, hashtag #ReLive. Thoughts on Kane in a balanced cash lineup? I don't mind it. I just don't think he has a ton of upside, but there certainly is some safety there. I just think I'd rather, instead of Kane, I'd rather drop down and maybe go Trevor Bayne and Ty Dillon, something like that, and then see what you can build with some more expensive pieces. Obviously, if you do something like that, you've got $9,000 per driver, so you still need somebody else $8,000 something or less, but you're going to have Blaney in there, so... then it becomes a little bit different as well. But I don't mind Casey Kane in a balanced lineup, and if you want to take that approach, I have no problem with it in cash games. I just don't think that's the approach I'm going to take, given the fact that I want to jam in Truex in a cash game lineup. I think I might go with a third cheaper option in addition to 2 Dominators and Blaney, and then maybe 3 cheaper options. And I might say cheaper. I don't mean like cheap, but I mean like balance as in like in that 6 to lower 7K range, something like that. Next question. Let's see. Hashtag #ReLive. Flipping through here. Hashtag #ReLive. Thoughts on Paul Menard because he's on baby watch. Is he a fade? So We've seen it a couple times this year. We've had drivers on baby watch, and Paul Menard did cede some laps to Daniel Hemrick in final practice. They wanted to get Hemrick some laps in case Hemrick needs to replace Paul Menard because Paul Menard is on baby watch. So make sure you keep an eye out for that. I think Hemrick actually is a pretty interesting GPP play if not Hemrick. Menard is an interesting GPP play if people are going to be scared by that. And if he's going to race, I like playing Menard for two reasons. One, people will be scared. Two, if for some reason he has to leave in the middle of the race, the points will still go to him, even if Daniel Hemrick jumps in that car. And they'll do it at the end of a stage or under a caution, something like that. And that'll be plenty of time for Hemrick to get in, not lose a lap, who knows, maybe Hemrick will find something in that car that Paul Menard can't find and give us a crazy wild finish. But even Menard hasn't had terrible times, and I think just will be super low owned. So I kind of like Menard as a GPP play rather than a fade, but I don't go crazy on him. He's going to be low owned. He's going to be 6, 7, 8% owned, 10, 15% tops on Paul Menard. Maybe 20% tops. If you're one of those people who plays 10 lineups, I don't mind having him in 2 lineups, but that is the absolute tops I would go. But I don't mind getting a little bit overweight on the field for Menard. There's plenty of other drivers you can get underweight on in GPPs. I think Casey Kane should be one of those drivers maybe you go a little under on, for example. I don't mind him in cash, but I think because he'll be probably a decent bit popular, maybe go a little under on Kane, for example. Next question, hashtag RVLive. Do you think Stenhouse will do the worst than... do you think Stenhouse will be the worst of the playoff drivers left? Also, how did you do last week in the DK Racing Championship? So I didn't participate last week in the DK Racing Championship because that was the finals, and I did not make the very finals. I got unlucky with that Kyle Busch crash 2 weeks ago. I was in first place in the final 10 there for the Fantasy Racing World Championship when Kyle Busch wrecked. I had both Busch and Harvick, and they both dominated. Harvick especially dominated. Harvick was only 20% owned. Only 2 out of 10 of us, me and NS Mafia, who is probably the best fantasy NASCAR player in the world, only me and him had Harvick, and Harvick dominated a very large chunk of that race. I also had Truex and Kyle Busch, and the 3 of them essentially dominated the whole race, other than the beginning part there where Hamlin dominated a little bit. But man, I felt really good about my lineup, and it was in first place, and then Kyle Busch wrecked. So he was 50% owned, and the 5 of us that owned Kyle Busch did not advance. So unfortunately, that's how it works out. But I thought my lineup was very good, and if Kyle Busch even just has a mediocre day, I advance. Unfortunately, because I had that Harvick dominance, but that's the way it goes. So I do think Stenhouse will be the worst of the playoff drivers left. To answer that other question, I don't think there's much going for him right now in terms of competition versus guys like Kyle Busch, versus guys like Kevin Harvick, even guys like Jamie McMurray. He just hasn't been better than them this year. Mile and a half's been okay for him, but I think Jamie McMurray's been so much more consistent. Now, of course, McMurray kind of needs to shoot for the moon because he's in bad shape. He's even in worse shape than Stenhouse, but just in terms of performance this weekend, I think Stenhouse does the worst of the playoff drivers. All right, well, I think that is all the questions we have here for RotoViz Live this weekend for Kansas. Thanks for bearing with me on that sound issue there at the beginning. I forgot to hit the push it over to the YouTube side, so bit of an error there, but we're good to go. So yeah, that's gonna do it. Good luck to everyone this weekend at Kansas. I think it's gonna be a fun race. I'm really excited about my picks. I really do think one of Boyer or Jones ends up in the winning lineup. I don't think it'll be both, but I think it'll be one or the other. Probably Boyer is my opinion. So I go a little higher on Boyer than Jones. I definitely like some Buescher exposure. Definitely like some Allmendinger exposure. Kurt Busch exposure. And I think Jimmy Johnson will be a driver that goes overlooked as well. So that's kind of where I am with GPPs this weekend. And good luck, everybody. And hopefully one of you guys, if not me, takes down the big tournament. Have a good weekend, everyone.